Have you ever noticed that many of the decisions you make each day aren't really your own? You post something online, then keep checking to see who liked it. You speak your mind, then immediately wonder what people thought of what you said. You want to pursue a meaningful goal, but hesitate because you're afraid of being judged. You want to say no, yet end up saying yes just to avoid disappointing someone. Little by little, you hand control of your life to people who probably think about you far less than you imagine. This is a kind of invisible prison. There are no bars, no locked doors, no chains around your wrists. Yet millions of people live inside it every day. They wake up feeling good only when they're praised. They feel valuable when they're recognized. They feel diminished when they're ignored. Their lives become an endless pursuit of approval. And the cruel irony is that the more they chase approval, the further they drift from themselves. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man in the world of his time. If anyone could have lived on admiration alone, it was him. Yet he understood something most people never learn. Other people's opinions change faster than the weather. The person praising you today may criticize you tomorrow. The person criticizing you today may seek your approval tomorrow. If your self-worth is built on something so unstable, peace will always remain out of reach. You will live like a leaf blown in every direction by the wind. Stoicism does not teach you to become cold. It does not teach you to reject people. It teaches something far deeper. Stop handing the steering wheel of your life to the crowd. In this video, you'll discover 10 Stoic rules that can free you from the need for approval. And when that freedom arrives, you may experience something you haven't felt in years, the feeling of finally belonging to yourself. Before we get into the rules, there's something important you need to understand. The desire for approval is not a sign of weakness. In many ways, it's a survival instinct. For thousands of years, being rejected by your tribe could mean isolation, vulnerability, or even death. Human beings evolved to seek acceptance because acceptance once increased the chances of survival. That ancient programming still exists inside us today. It's why a single negative comment can stay in your mind for hours. It's why criticism from a stranger can sometimes hurt more than logic says it should. It's why many adults are still affected by words spoken to them years ago. Your brain often interprets social rejection as a genuine threat. The problem is that the modern world has changed. You no longer need the approval of hundreds of people to survive. Yet your mind often reacts as if every opinion carries life or death importance. The Stoics recognized this long before psychology gave it a name. Epictetus was born a slave. He had no wealth, no status, and no social power. Yet he understood a truth that remains just as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. If your happiness depends on what other people think of you, you will never be free. You may not be a slave to a master, but you will become a slave to every opinion. Every compliment will control your mood. Every criticism will shake your confidence. Every rejection will feel like a verdict on your worth. That is not freedom. It is dependence disguised as social acceptance. Stoicism offers a different path. Not a path of isolation, not a path of arrogance, and certainly not a path of ignoring other people. Instead, it teaches you how to build an inner foundation strong enough that your identity no longer depends on external approval. The 10 rules you're about to hear are designed to help build that foundation. Because true freedom begins the moment you stop asking the crowd who you should be, and start deciding that for yourself. Rule 1. Realize that you cannot control what other people think. Much of human suffering begins with a battle that can never be won. The battle to control how other people see you. You want people to understand your intentions. You want them to appreciate your efforts. You want them to recognize your value. But no matter how carefully you explain yourself, some people will misunderstand you. Some people will dislike you. Some people will criticize you. That is not a failure. It is reality. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself that it is possible to live a good life even if others fail to recognize it. Why? Because other people's thoughts do not belong to you. They exist outside your control. And according to Stoicism, anything outside your control should never become the foundation of your peace. Imagine standing in front of a distorted mirror. No matter how many times you adjust your posture, the reflection remains warped. The problem is not you. The problem is the mirror. Many people function in exactly the same way. They see the world through their own fears, experiences, insecurities, ambitions, and assumptions. What they think about you often says more about them than it does about you. Once you truly understand this, something begins to change. You stop wasting energy trying to manage everyone's perception. You stop replaying negative comments in your head for hours. You stop exhausting yourself attempting to win universal approval. Most importantly, you stop sacrificing your peace in exchange for agreement. This does not mean becoming indifferent to feedback. It means recognizing the difference between learning from criticism and becoming enslaved by it. The Stoics understood that your responsibility ends with your actions. You are responsible for your character, your choices, your effort, your integrity. You are not responsible for the stories other people create about you. Freedom begins the moment you accept a simple truth. You can control what you do. You can control how you respond. You can control the person you become. But you cannot control what exists inside someone else's mind, and that has never been your job. Rule 2. Stop using praise as emotional fuel. Most people believe they simply need to become less sensitive to criticism. But Stoicism points to something deeper. If you depend on praise, you also depend on criticism. The two are connected. They are opposite ends of the same chain. The person who lives for applause will always fear rejection. The person who needs recognition will always fear being ignored. This is why so many successful people remain deeply insecure. They have status. They have attention. They have admiration. They have achievements that others dream about. Yet they still feel restless, still uncertain, still hungry for validation. Why? Because they have allowed other people to determine their worth. And when someone else decides your value, you never truly own yourself. Seneca warned that public opinion is one of the most unstable things in the world. The crowd praises today and condemns tomorrow. What is celebrated in one season may be mocked in the next. If your confidence rises and falls with public approval, your emotional life will never be stable. Ask yourself an uncomfortable question. If nobody noticed your effort, would you still do the right thing? If nobody praised your discipline, would you continue improving? If nobody applauded your growth, would you keep moving forward? Your answers reveal how free you really are. The strongest people are not those who receive the most recognition. They are the ones who continue acting with purpose, even when recognition never arrives. They do not work for attention. They work because the work itself matters. They do not live to impress others. They live according to principles they respect. This is one of the most powerful shifts a person can make. When praise becomes a bonus instead of a necessity, your life changes. You become less anxious, less performative, less dependent on the reactions of others. You begin speaking more honestly, acting more courageously, living more authentically. And for the first time, your self-worth stops being something borrowed from the crowd. It becomes something built from within. That is the kind of confidence no one can take away. Rule 3. Stop explaining yourself to everyone. One of the most common traps people fall into when seeking approval is the need to constantly explain themselves. They explain their decisions. They explain their choices. They explain why they changed. They explain why they said no. They explain why they chose a different path. They explain themselves so often that it becomes a full-time job. At first, this seems reasonable. You believe that if people simply understood you better, they would agree with you. If they knew your intentions, they would approve. If they heard the full story, they would stop judging you. But life rarely works that way. The people who genuinely want to understand you usually need very little explanation. The people who have already decided not to understand you will remain unconvinced no matter how much evidence you provide. Epictetus understood this well. He taught that another person's misunderstanding does not automatically become your responsibility. What matters most is not whether everyone approves of your choices. What matters is whether those choices align with your principles. Think about how much energy is wasted trying to manage other people's perceptions. Long messages, repeated explanations, endless mental rehearsals, hours spent replaying conversations in your head. And what is often the result? Exhaustion, frustration, and sometimes the other person still refuses to see your perspective. Why? Because you are attempting to control something that was never yours to control. Not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. Not every criticism deserves a response. Not every opinion deserves your attention. One of the clearest signs of maturity is learning when silence is stronger than explanation. You know why you made the decision. You know what values guided you. You know the truth behind your actions. Sometimes that is enough. The need to constantly defend yourself is often just another form of approval seeking. It is the hidden hope that if you explain yourself perfectly, everyone will finally accept you. But freedom begins when you let go of that hope. If you've ever felt exhausted from constantly proving yourself to others, comment number 1. Let it be a reminder that your energy is too valuable to spend your life arguing for your worth. The most powerful statement you can make is not a perfect explanation. It is a life that quietly reflects your values. Over time, consistent actions will always speak louder than endless justifications. Rule 4. Accept that not everyone will like you. One of the most destructive illusions in life is the belief that if you are good enough, kind enough, or careful enough, everyone will eventually like you. But reality does not work that way. There has never been a single person in history who was loved by everyone. Not Marcus Aurelius, not Seneca, not Epictetus, not any great leader, thinker, artist, or innovator. If even the most respected people who ever lived were criticized, misunderstood, and rejected, why would you expect a different outcome for yourself? The truth is that every person sees the world through a unique lens. What one person admires about you may be exactly what another person dislikes. What one person considers confidence, another may call arrogance. What one person sees as independence, another may view as selfishness. You cannot control those interpretations. And trying to manage them all is a losing battle from the very beginning. The greater danger is what happens while you are fighting that battle. You slowly abandon yourself. You start saying things you do not truly believe. You agree when you really want to disagree. You hide parts of your personality to avoid rejection. You become a version of yourself designed for acceptance rather than authenticity. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that every day he would encounter difficult people, selfish people, ungrateful people, jealous people, people who would misunderstand him. He did not expect universal approval. He accepted human nature as it is. There is enormous freedom in doing the same. There will always be people who dislike you. Not because you are wrong, not because you lack value, but simply because human beings are different. The moment you stop trying to win everyone's approval, life becomes lighter. You stop performing. You stop editing yourself for every audience. You stop carrying the impossible burden of universal acceptance. Instead, you focus on something far more important, becoming a person you can genuinely respect. Because in the end, the goal is not to be liked by everyone. The goal is to live in a way that allows you to respect yourself when no one else is watching. Rule 5. Stop looking for your worth in other people's eyes. At the root of approval seeking lies a deeper problem than most people realize. Many people do not simply want others to like them. They need others to like them in order to feel valuable. That distinction changes everything. There is nothing wrong with enjoying a compliment. There is nothing wrong with appreciating recognition for your efforts. The problem begins when your sense of worth depends on those things. Because the moment your value depends on external approval, your emotional stability becomes dependent on it as well. Think about how strange this really is. A stranger says something positive about you, and suddenly you feel more confident. Another stranger criticizes you, and your mood collapses. How can someone who barely knows your story possess that much power over your inner world? The answer is simple. Somewhere along the way, you handed them that power. You allowed other people to become judges of your worth. The Stoics warned against this repeatedly. Epictetus argued that the most unfortunate person is not the one who lacks money, status, or success. The most unfortunate person is the one whose value depends on things outside their control. Reputation, popularity, recognition, attention, admiration. All of these things are unstable. They come and go. They rise and fall. Today, you may be admired. Tomorrow, you may be forgotten. Imagine someone who spends 20 years building a reputation, collecting praise, chasing admiration, and measuring every achievement by the reactions of others. Then one day the attention fades. The applause becomes quieter. The recognition disappears. If that person never learned to value themselves beyond public approval, they are forced to discover a painful truth. They spent years building an image while neglecting the person behind it. If your identity is built on unstable foundations, your identity will constantly shake. The Stoics chose a different path. Instead of measuring themselves through public opinion, they measured themselves through character. They asked questions such as, did I act with integrity? Did I keep my word? Did I show courage when it mattered? Did I become slightly better than I was yesterday? These are standards that do not depend on the crowd. They do not depend on trends. They do not depend on social media. They do not depend on whether people approve of you. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet his private writings reveal a man constantly reminding himself to focus on inner character rather than external reputation. He understood something that remains true today. Reputation exists in other people's minds. Character exists in your actions. One belongs to the world. The other belongs to you. The moment you stop asking, what do people think about me? And begin asking, what kind of person am I becoming? Your life starts to change. Your confidence becomes stronger. Your peace becomes deeper. Your decisions become clearer, because your value is no longer borrowed from the opinions of others. It is built from principles that cannot be taken away. And that is the foundation of genuine freedom. Rule 6. Learn to make rejection harmless. The fear of rejection has prevented countless people from living the life they truly want. It has stopped people from starting businesses, from speaking honestly, from pursuing meaningful relationships, from taking opportunities that could have changed their lives, from becoming the person they were capable of becoming. Not because they lacked talent, not because they lacked intelligence, but because they were afraid of hearing one simple word, no. Yet if you look carefully, rejection is rarely as dangerous as your mind makes it seem. What actually happens when someone rejects you? In most cases, nothing catastrophic. You wake up the next morning. You continue breathing. You continue learning. You continue moving forward. Life goes on. The real pain usually comes from the story you attach to the event. A rejection becomes, I'm not good enough. A criticism becomes, I'm a failure. A closed door becomes, I'll never succeed. The Stoics challenged this habit directly. They taught that we must separate events from interpretations. The event itself is often neutral. The suffering comes from the meaning we assign to it. A rejection is simply a rejection. An opinion is simply an opinion. A result is simply a result. Nothing more, nothing less. Seneca famously observed that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Few examples demonstrate this more clearly than the fear of rejection. Many people spend years avoiding situations that might lead to rejection. And in doing so, they reject themselves first. The truly free person is not someone who never gets rejected. The truly free person is someone who refuses to let rejection define them. Every time you risk being misunderstood, you become stronger. Every time you take action despite criticism, you become more resilient. Every time you choose courage over approval, you reclaim a little more of your freedom. If you've been postponing an important decision because you're worried about what other people might think, comment number 1. Let it be a small commitment to yourself. A declaration that from this day forward, you will make decisions based on your values rather than your fears. Because your life is far too valuable to be controlled by the imagined judgments of other people. Rule 7. Stop placing your peace in the hands of the crowd. Imagine handing the keys to your house to random strangers walking down the street. One person opens the door. Another rearranges the furniture. A third decides what belongs inside and what does not. You would never willingly give strangers that kind of control over your home. Yet many people give strangers even greater control over something far more important: their inner peace. A compliment improves their day. A criticism ruins it. A negative comment stays in their mind for hours. A disapproving look becomes a source of anxiety. Their emotional state changes constantly based on the reactions of people around them. That is not peace. That is emotional dependence. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than most. As emperor, he faced criticism, political attacks, betrayal, rumors, and public judgment on a massive scale. Had he reacted emotionally to every opinion, he would have spent his life defending himself instead of leading. Instead, he repeatedly returned to a simple question: does this affect my character? Does this affect my ability to do what is right? If the answer was no, he moved on. There is a profound lesson in that approach. Most of the things that disturb us have little actual impact on our lives. Someone dislikes you. Someone misunderstands you. Someone judges you unfairly. These things can be unpleasant, but they cannot destroy your peace unless you give them permission. The Stoics never tried to control the crowd. They focused on controlling their responses. They understood that peace does not come from getting everyone to agree with you. Peace comes from no longer needing everyone to agree with you. That is a completely different way of living. When you stop placing your emotional well-being in other people's hands, something remarkable happens. You become calmer, more stable, less reactive, less distracted by unnecessary noise. You begin to realize that your peace is an internal responsibility, not a public project. And once that realization takes root, the opinions of others lose much of their power. The crowd can still speak. The world can still judge. People can still misunderstand you. But your inner life no longer rises and falls with every passing opinion. And that is where real freedom begins. Rule 8. Stop performing to be liked. One of the highest prices people pay for approval is that they slowly become actors in their own lives. Not on a stage, not in a movie, but in everyday life. They change their personality depending on who is in the room. They hide what they truly think. They agree with opinions they do not share. They laugh when nothing is funny. They say yes when every part of them wants to say no. At first, these compromises seem small, harmless even. But over time, they create a growing distance between who you really are and who you pretend to be. That distance comes with a cost. You may become more accepted. You may become more popular. You may become easier for others to like. But deep down, you will always wonder whether people love the real you or merely the version you perform for them. That is a unique kind of loneliness. You can be surrounded by people and still feel unseen. You can be admired and still feel unknown, because the attention is directed toward the mask rather than the person wearing it. Epictetus warned that no one can be truly free while living against their own nature. The moment you begin building your life around performance, you become responsible for maintaining that performance forever. And maintaining a false image requires constant energy. The Stoics chose authenticity instead, not rudeness, not selfishness, not a complete disregard for other people. Authenticity simply means refusing to sacrifice your identity in exchange for approval. Some people will like you more. Some people will like you less. That is normal. That is life. But at least the life you are living will belong to you, not to social expectations, not to public opinion, not to people who only accept you when you fit their preferences. Real freedom begins when you stop asking, "What version of myself will make people approve of me?" and start asking, "What version of myself is actually true?" Because the goal of life is not to become universally accepted. The goal is to become fully yourself. And that journey starts the moment you stop performing. Rule 9. Build an inner court stronger than external noise. Most people live as if they are standing in a courtroom every day of their lives. They wait for the verdict of other people. They wait to see whether others approve of them. They wait to see whether others agree with them. They wait to see whether the crowd will declare them worthy. Without realizing it, they spend years placing their identity on trial. The problem is that this trial never ends. The jury keeps changing. The standards keep changing. The opinions keep changing. One group praises you. Another criticizes you. One generation admires something. The next generation mocks it. If your self-worth depends on these shifting judgments, stability becomes impossible. This is why Stoicism proposes something radically different. Instead of building your life around external approval, build an inner court. Create an internal standard by which you judge yourself. Stop asking, "What does everyone think about me?" And start asking, "Am I acting with integrity? Am I living according to my values? Am I showing courage when it matters? Am I becoming a better human being?" These are questions no crowd can answer for you. Only you can. Marcus Aurelius practiced this regularly. At the end of many days, he reflected on his own behavior. Not to shame himself, not to punish himself, but to honestly evaluate whether he had lived according to his principles. Many historians believe that is one reason his writings still resonate today. He treated self-reflection as a daily discipline. While the world judged him as an emperor, he judged himself as a human being trying to improve. He did not appoint the public as judge and jury. He became accountable to his own conscience. That is an extraordinary form of strength. When you develop clear internal standards, outside opinions lose much of their power. You still listen to useful feedback. You still learn from mistakes. You still remain open to growth. But you stop giving strangers the authority to determine your value. You can receive praise without becoming addicted to it. You can receive criticism without being crushed by it, because your foundation exists somewhere deeper. Imagine a ship crossing a stormy ocean. The waves rise. The wind changes direction. The sea becomes chaotic. Yet the ship continues forward because it possesses something more reliable than the weather. It has a compass. Your values serve the same purpose. When you know what you stand for, external noise becomes less dangerous. The crowd may cheer. The crowd may criticize. The crowd may misunderstand you completely. But your direction remains clear. If you've spent years living according to other people's expectations, comment number 1. Let it be a declaration that from today forward, the most important voice in your life will no longer be the voice of the crowd. It will be the voice of your conscience, your principles, your character. Because true freedom begins when your inner court becomes stronger than the noise outside. Rule 10. Live by truth instead of approval. Every rule in this video ultimately leads to a single choice. A choice that appears again and again throughout your life. Will you live according to truth or according to approval? At first glance, the question sounds simple. But in reality, it appears in countless moments of everyday life. You want to speak honestly, but remain silent because you're afraid of being judged. You want to pursue a different path, but choose the safer one because you're worried about disappointing others. You want to make a major change in your life, but delay it because you're concerned about what people might think. Again and again, you arrive at the same crossroads. On one side stands truth, on the other stands approval. Most people choose approval, not because they are weak, not because they lack intelligence, but because approval often offers short-term comfort. It protects you from criticism. It helps you avoid uncomfortable conversations. It allows you to blend in. The problem is that comfort comes at a price. Years later, many people look back and realize they spent more time living according to other people's expectations than their own convictions. Few regrets cut deeper than that. Seneca repeatedly reminded himself that life is shorter than we think. Time moves quietly. Days become years. Years become decades. And before long, opportunities that once seemed endless begin to disappear. When viewed through that lens, spending your life chasing approval becomes a tragic exchange. Trading authenticity for acceptance. Trading purpose for comfort. Trading freedom for approval. The Stoics understood that truth requires courage. The courage to be misunderstood. The courage to be criticized. The courage to stand apart from the crowd. The courage to walk alone when necessary. But they also understood something equally important. That courage is the price of freedom. You do not need everyone to agree with you. You do not need everyone to admire you. You do not need everyone to approve of you. What you need is the ability to look in the mirror and know that you are living according to the values you believe in. Because when that happens, something remarkable changes. You stop chasing freedom. You stop chasing acceptance. You stop chasing permission. And for perhaps the first time in your life, you realize that freedom was never something you needed to find. It was something you needed to choose. For most of their lives, many people pursue something that is ultimately impossible. They try to make everyone happy. They change themselves to fit expectations. They hide parts of who they are. They worry endlessly about judgment. They fear rejection. They fear criticism. They fear being misunderstood. And in the process, they slowly surrender their freedom. But as the Stoics understood centuries ago, this path never leads to peace. It leads only to dependence. True freedom does not arrive when everyone approves of you. It arrives when you no longer require that approval in order to feel valuable. You cannot control what other people think. You cannot control their opinions. You cannot control who likes you and who does not. But you can control your character. You can control your actions. You can control the principles you choose to live by. And that is where real power lives. One day, years from now, you will look back on the life you lived. And in that moment, the opinions that once seemed so important will matter far less than you imagine. What will matter is whether you were honest with yourself, whether you had the courage to live according to your values, whether you chose authenticity over approval when the choice was difficult. So from this day forward, stop handing the steering wheel of your life to the crowd. Stop measuring your worth through the reactions of other people. Stop living as a prisoner of approval. Instead, build an inner life strong enough to remain steady, even when the world disagrees with you. Because the strongest form of confidence is not knowing that everyone supports you. It is knowing that you can stand firm even when they don't. If you found value in these Stoic lessons and want to continue building a calmer, stronger, and freer mind, make sure to subscribe to the channel and join us for future videos. And remember this: the moment you stop seeking approval from the world may be the very moment you finally discover yourself.